Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. Today, everything you see is for sale. Our series returns, Waking Up with Watches on Wednesday Watches. Reach out to me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. I have pricing details for every watch you see here. We're also looking to build inventory. Buy, trade, sell. We do it all. Sell your watch, sell your entire collection. We pay cash, we pay fast. No upper limit on value paid. We will buy your entire collection of vintage FP Journe tourbillon. If you want to buy, trade, or sell, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. Let's jump straight in with the timepiece that represents one of the it watches of our moment, the 1 year only Turquoise Blue dial Rolex OP41. So technically reference 124300, 41 millimeters in stainless steel. This debuted in 2021. For 2022, the Turquoise Blue dial was discontinued on the 41 millimeter case size, making this a particularly desirable and attractive 1 year variant. For the first time, the OP was available in a 41 millimeter case, and you can see it has an impressive presence on the wrist. The OP traditionally was not an imposing watch. That was always left to the divers, to the Explorer 2, the GMT. This watch has more of a presence on the wrist. At 41 millimeters, you can see end link to end link. The case swells to a total of 51.3 millimeters across the wrist, meaning I really recommend this watch for a wrist of 15 centimeters circumference or larger. My wrist is 16 centimeters circumference. I could wear it, but much smaller than this, I would want something like an OP36. Now let's take a look at the lume. The watch has a 70-hour power reserve. It's anti-magnetic shock resistant, 100 meters water resistant, and particularly well loomed. As you can see, it gives up absolutely nothing to any of the more heralded Rolex sports watch families. And if you do have that smaller wrist and you want the same look and the similar experience, well, here we have reference 126000. So this is the 36 millimeter traditionally sized OP36. The 36 millimeter case size over the years has been used in Rolex Explorers, Oyster Perpetuals, Datejusts, and Date-8s. It is really the traditional Rolex case size, and it wears well on my wrist. I'd be just as happy wearing this as the 41. And here you have a watch that can be worn on a wrist as small as 13 centimeters in circumference. Using the same movement as the other watch, they operate identically, no differences in function or in water resistance. You can see both of them even feature comparable levels of luminescence, so you'll have no trouble reading either of these watches. Now, I have a wonderful proposal. If you've got the goods, this is one hell of a his and hers set. Just a thought. All right, let's jump from conventional watches to unconventional watches. Here we have one of my favorite Jaeger-LeCoultre models of all time. This is the Amvox 2. Now, when JLC launched its partnership, a 10-year deal to make Aston Martin-themed watches, a lot of eyes rolled as automotive branded watches, co-branded watches, tend to be a train wreck of bad ideas mashed together for the sake of shotgun marketing. So shotgun marriage agreements, for example, Ball and BMW, or the immensely forced and unconvincing Panerai Ferrari series. This is not one of those. This was an entirely new line of watches. We're not talking variants on existing Jaeger-LeCoultre models, but all new models and a dedicated model line for Aston Martin, of which the Amvox 2 was undoubtedly the opus. The watch is a chronograph without pushers, 44 millimeters in diameter, in titanium. You can see it's a limited series of 750 pieces. You actually push the crystal at the top to stop and to start. Stop it, reset by pressing down at 6 o'clock, restart. There's even a locking system so you can prevent it from starting altogether or prevent yourself from accidentally resetting it. The idea here is that the watch can be worn and used by crew or drivers at endurance sports car races, where you would tend to wear gloves over your hands, making screw-down crowns and tiny pushers a la Rolex Daytona nearly impossible. This solves the problem. With your fat finger, you can start, stop, and reset the chronograph mechanism with consummate ease. Now, while it's a 44 millimeter watch, I owned this model for about 4 years, and I consider it one of my most frequently worn Jaeger-LeCoultre watches. I never had a problem wearing this 44 millimeter watch, and you can see to good effect how it sits. In grade 5 titanium, it's very light. It's all titanium and sapphire. That's how it's constructed. We'll do a quick lume shot here. You could see that the discs for the chronograph are solid blocks of luminova, and the rare black variant of superluminova is used for the numerals. You'll also be able to see quite easily that the font as well as the Calypso style hands are drawn from the history of the JLC Polaris diving alarm. Now you can actually see the hammers that operate the chronograph reset mechanism down at 6 o'clock through a transparency in the dial. And then you'll appreciate that the dial is laid out like the tachometer or speedometer of an Aston Martin car. It's important to note that Jaeger instruments were on Aston Martin cars from the 1920s through the 1990s. So this is a co-branding that made a lot of sense because there was prior business history between the two companies. And you could see why the bottom of the watch does not feature numerals or calibration. Traditionally, the needle would move over a limited sweep, maybe 270 degrees of a speedometer or tachometer. You can also see how the numerals are radially aligned. It really does look like a dashboard instrument. And you can see the different focal planes as well as the different textures, tones, and materials used. It is a tour de force. Column wheel, vertical clutch, automatic winding, twin barrel, 65-hour power reserve movement inside. You can see the Aston Martin gas cap of the 1950s inspired the crown. And on the reverse side, you have the Aston Martin wings. And JLC was remarkably discreet about that. You could just barely see the Aston Martin wings ghosted onto the base of the dial. It's almost invisible on the dial side. And then on the reverse side, you can more easily see how the case pivots. It's mounted on ball bearings for precision. A very innovative design. And of course, if Richard Mille created something like this case-based chronograph mechanism, in all likelihood, the stupid thing would have cost $500,000. From JLC, it originally had a retail of about $16,000 and used. These represent one of the great high horology buys in the modern era. An absolutely stunning watch and something that represents the best of Jaeger-LeCoultre. An automotive co-branded watch that was anything but a shotgun marriage and still looks as good today as it did then. Next, we have two from Patek Philippe, including a real landmark watch. This is the Patek Philippe 5035R. So 36 millimeters in rose gold. This was the first ever annual calendar, both for Patek and for the industry. Patek patented the annual calendar in 1996, and it bridged the gap between the complex calendar, which needs to be adjusted 5 times per year, and the perpetual calendar, which need not be adjusted but was fragile, difficult to tune, expensive to service, and expensive to purchase. So here you get most of the advantages of a perpetual. The dial is original tritium. The hands are service replacement Luminova, but the dial here is original tritium for the numerals. Gloss black lacquer base. We have the day, we have the date, we have the month, we have a 24-hour indicator so you know when not to attempt to use the push adjusters for the calendar. You can see this watch is old school. It features lateral hallmarking on the case, something that was common in the 1990s. And then on the reverse side, you can see it uses the caliber 315 automatic base for the annual calendar mechanism. It's an automatic winder with a 45-hour power reserve, 5-position chronometer style adjustment, a Gyromax free sprung balance, and the lauded and hallowed Poisson de Genève that Patek Philippe phased out in mid-2009 for the Patek Philippe seal. So a really cool watch, one of the most important Patek Philippe watches, and not just that, one of the most important watches for the industry as a whole. At 36 millimeters in rose gold, this Dash 11 variant is an easy watch to wear. Again, 43.9 millimeters. When you have a watch that short across the wrist, it goes without saying in this day and age that is a unisex option for him or for her. This watch is only slightly larger at 37 millimeters, but it has a completely different look and ambiance. Made from 2000 to 2006, this is the 5110G World Time, the first series production Patek Philippe World Time watch since the 2523 of the 20th century, the mid-20th century. Here you can see the watch in white gold, features the Louis Coutier and Patek Philippe developed World Time system, where you put your reference city up at the top. Let's just make this simple to read. We're going to set the time to 9 o'clock. So let's say I want to travel from South Georgia to Dubai. I'm going to put my reference city up at 12 o'clock. This is easy to do. And there you go. Now I can see that it is 3 in the afternoon. It is 1500. This is simple. You read the minute at center, and then you read the hour that's adjacent to the city. So in Los Angeles, you can see 3, and that's in 24-hour format, that little ring. So it's 3 a.m. in Los Angeles. It is 11 a.m. in London. It is 8 o'clock at night in Tokyo. Just like that. That's how you read the world time system. The hands and the indices are white gold, and then at center we have this lovely ricochet style Roselet the guilloche. We have a counterclockwise rotating 24-hour reference ring, and you can see half of it's blue. That represents the areas where it is night, and then half of it's silver representing the areas where it is day. We have a deployant clasp here, a full folding clasp with the Calatrava cross. Flip it all over. It's based on the Patek Philippe caliber 240 micro rotor, which is an automatic winder that is as thin as a manual movement, has the big open case-back vista of manual movement, as you don't have the blocked vision of a center rotor. You can see here with the center rotor, the bridge blocks a lot of the view, the rotor blocks even more, but with the micro rotor, all is laid bare. So automatic winding, 48-hour power reserve, 5-position adjustment, Gyromax style, free sprung balance, 6 beats per second, handsomely hand finished, and it features that old Geneva hallmark. This watch is 37 millimeters in diameter, just a little bit bigger than the 50-35 we saw a moment ago, and it wears quite comfortably. As you can see on my wrist, I'd also recommend this as a unisex option. The succeeding world time watches grew considerably larger, up to 39.5 millimeters. Those don't all wear well on small wrists. This is almost a universal match. Next, we have two from Omega, starting with a watch that came out in 2020. This is a tribute to a timepiece originally launched in 1993. That was the Omega Seamaster Diver 300-meter Tritone chronograph, featuring rose gold, tantalum, and titanium. And here we have it again. This is the Diver 300-meter chronograph tantalum, though to be fair, it includes all 3 metals. You can see on the bracelet we have all 3. We have in the center of the intermediate links a sandwiched strip of blue-gray tantalum. Then we have the rose gold flanking. Then the primary links are made of titanium. You can see that the clasp features both a fold-out dive extension with ceramic pin snaps and a 9.6 millimeter push-button incremental slider. The watch includes a case constructed of all 3 materials. You can see just how distinctly blue the tantalum is in comparison to the gray of the titanium. The bezel itself is made of tantalum, and you know this because it actually says tantalum somewhere on it. We'll find that. There it is, right there. Tantalum. The cap is Sedna Red Gold, which is Omega's answer to Rolex Ever Rose and Hublot's King Gold. It's a redder rose gold that has a higher copper content to make it red, and it has a higher platinum content so it won't fade over time. Though the watch appears to have screw-down pushers, they're actually just shoulders to protect the pushers. You can operate the pushers without threading the shoulders in or out. The watch is still 300 meters water resistant and has a helium escape valve for saturation divers to let helium out of the watch. There's an individual numbering plate on the side, though the watch is not limited edition, it is a numbered edition. The bezel is 120 click and has a nice satisfying action to it. You can see that it has an inlaid rose gold insert, and the dial is fully loomed, including sub-registers. Also note that the minute hand and the bezel pearl are green, so you can easily read them against each other. The watch features a ceramic dial in blue. You can see it's media blasted and polished. We have the skeleton style, so-called James Bond hands. I once said of the original 1993 Tritone that it felt like the watch a Bond villain would wear. Over-the-top, sybaritic, and garish. And this watch is all of that, but it's also charming, as the Tritone has always been an unusual and quirky combination that was then and is now unique to Omega, a very distinctive timepiece that, if anything, has grown up with levels of refinement and technical sophistication unknown to the 1990s original. This is a really cool watch, and at 44 millimeters, you need a wrist at least my size to wear it, but what an experience once you do. Really a cool piece. 60-hour power reserve, master chronometer, certified, caliber 9900, vertical clutch and column wheel, anti-magnetic, braced against shock, and of course water resistant down to 300 meters. This watch features all of the toys. The next watch is a legend in its own time, a timepiece retailing for under $8,000 when it was new back in 2015. No one at the time had any idea that the Omega Silver Snoopy 2 would become a Rolex level, maybe even Patek level market phenomenon. And you can see the watch is elaborately loomed on the dial side here. We have solid blocks of Luminova as the indices. You can see they have 3 dimensions. They tower above the dial base. Snoopy is loomed. The entire tachymeter is loomed. And of course, the watch, well, you know it before you see it even. It's become famous. Black and white dial designed to evoke the comic strips drawn by Charles Schulz featuring the Peanuts characters from which Snoopy is drawn. You have little comic style cells, 14 of them, to represent the 14 seconds, timed by an Omega Speedmaster professional while firing the rockets to help realign the crippled Apollo 13 capsule with Earth orbit and re-entry. So you have those 14 strips proposing what could you do in 14 seconds? Then you can see the thought bubble from Snoopy, failure is not an option, which is actually, I believe, an Ed Harris quote from the Apollo 13 movie. The watch, of course, features a tachymeter scale that is ceramic and a sapphire crystal over the dial. The strap is unique to the model. You can see it features gusseting, so you don't gouge the perforations for the buckle. There's a contrasting stitch textile on the top, calfskin on the bottom. The watch comes with a full trigger-actuated deployant clasp, and on the reverse of the case, we have a rather spectacular combination of a vitreous blue enamel base with little flecks of copper inserted to create the image of the cosmos behind a hand-engraved sterling silver Snoopy. And this particular image of Snoopy is the Snoopy that was drawn specifically by Charles Schulz for the Silver Snoopy Award. So this is a special award logo he drew up for an award given by the astronauts themselves to distinguished employees and contractors of the NASA space program. And in October of 1970, the astronauts from the Apollo 13 mission awarded the Silver Snoopy to Omega for the role of the Speedmaster professional in helping to reclaim the crippled capsule. Officially, this watch was the Apollo 13 45th anniversary watch. So that's what's being referenced on the back. And in honor of the year the capsule was saved, 1970, this is a 1,970 piece limited edition. And it is a 41 millimeter, or I should say 42 millimeter steel moon watch. So a steel 42, it wears exactly like any other moon watch. It is just far scarcer, far more valuable, and far more distinctive, right down to the black on white dial, which is as stark and readable in the light as it is when loomed. Inside, Moonwatch caliber 1861 manual wind 48-hour power reserve, the same caliber that for years and years flew with NASA and continues to fly with NASA, even as the newer version of the Moonwatch caliber is phased in. It is a cam lateral clutch chronograph that is tested against instantaneous shock levels of up to 5,000 G, which is to say, it is very tough. If you want a even more elemental sports watch, well, Panerai proposes this PAM1243. This is the Radomir Eileen. The Eileen is a yacht owned by Panerai since 2006. The yacht was made in 1936, which was the first year Panerai combat watches became available in series to the Italian Marina Militare and its pioneering amphibious warfare units. So that was the year the 3646 combat watch became available in numbers. It was also the year the Eileen was made. In 2006, Panerai bought the boat in a state of disrepair and committed to a multi-year restoration. The yacht now travels as a roving ambassador for the Panerai brand. This watch, in burnished, that is sort of a clouded stainless steel, is 45 millimeters in diameter and 100 meters water resistant. On my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, you can see that it represents a 54.4 millimeter lug-to-lug span, but it still wears well. I think even on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters, the watch is going to look big, but that is the look. It's going to fit. Now, this is a special piece for a couple of reasons, and most of those pertain to details. This strap is entirely made by hand. The stitching is designed to evoke the stitching on the sails of the Eileen, and you can see that the strap itself is shear cut on the side, very thickly sectioned and minimally tanned with a lot of roughness and a lot of elemental distinctive marks of the actual animal hide. It hasn't been over refined. You can see hot stamped the name of the ship, or the name of the boat, I should say, the year of its original manufacture. And then we have a matching burnished steel trapezoidal pin buckle to match the sort of clouded steel, the burnished steel used on the case. On the flank, we can see the name of the boat as it appears on the boom of the boat. And then we can see this little dragon logo that's featured on the hull. We have a 1970s style OP logo on the crown. Again, 100 meters water resistant. The watch is elaborately loomed, and you can see that. Instantly recognizable as a Panerai timepiece, and you can see this is the result of a sandwich dial construction with a fully loomed dial disc underneath a stencil that features the numerals and the indices. The watch is a manual wind with a 3-day power reserve. Again, the name on the reverse side. And then we have a dial that's designed to evoke the teak decks of the actual Eileen. And it's a valid proposition as Panerai attempts to add another dimension on top of its fascist frogmen heritage. Not everyone digs that. So Panerai has decided there should also be a lifestyle appeal, and that lifestyle is La Dolce Vita, which makes sense given the Italian roots of the brand, but it doesn't take a genius or a watch historian to understand that yachting and frogmen are fundamentally different appeals to different groups. This is not for the paneristo. This is not for the hardcore guy who is into the brand online in the late 90s, early 2000s. This is for a more recent arrival to the Panerai brand who thinks of the company as a nautically themed luxury nameplate. And that's exactly what this watch provides. You can see that it has that teak deck style striation. And then it wears easy and comfortable on the wrist with that wonderfully distinctive strap. This is one of the few Panerai watches that comes with a model-specific strap, and this was a 449-piece special series for 2021. All right. In 2016, Longa broke new ground with its long-running and celebrated Dottograph collection. At 41 millimeters in platinum, this is the 100-piece limited edition Dottograph Perpetual tourbillon, and there's a lot to discuss. First, like the other Dottograph models, it is a flyback chronograph with a double-digit date, so I can reset the chrono and restart it just by pushing the reset trigger. Surprisingly, it has a flyback chronograph, tachymeter, and plenty of lume, which makes this a sportier dress complication than you might expect. The dial base is made of sterling silver, though it's galvanized black to give it an intensity. We have a perpetual calendar, and we have a little day-night indicator that's coaxial with the constant seconds and the day of the week. We have a solid gold, white gold moon phase discs. That's how they do it at Longa. They use solid gold moon phase discs. We have a power reserve indicator over between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock, and it is a manual wind movement. The 9522 is the movement used here, and it has a manual wind 50-hour power reserve. The watch also has a little mechanism that allows you to adjust everything in sync. See how the moon phase, the day, and the date are all adjusting? You have to pull the crown out to operate that mechanism. The reason you have that is, should the watch run down and you pick it up, say, 6 days later, you just index the switch 6 times to catch up, and everything moves in sync, so you don't have to look up the day, the date, the moon phase. You just quickly reprogram the watch, and the perpetual calendar is back in action. But what really makes this watch special is that it combines the perpetual, the power reserve, and the flyback chronograph with a tourbillon. You can see it has incredible depth. There are silver steel components here, golden toned German silver components, and then we have this black polished skeletonized bridge for the tourbillon. You can see there are many sharp interior angles here, but if you take a look at the steel chronograph clutch, you can also see that there are sharp exterior angles where bevels meet. Very difficult to achieve. Take note, as I tilt the watch through the light, everything that turns black as I tilt it is black polished or mirror finished with diamond paste. Also, take a look at this. Hacking seconds on a tourbillon. It's true. The tourbillon cage features a historic design associated with 20th century German watchmaking, and if you look carefully, you can see that the capstone of the tourbillon is actually a brilliant cut diamond. This watch is opulent beyond words. It is a 100-piece limited edition. It is beautifully finished, and unlike a lot of complicated watches that hide the complexity underneath layers of bridges and sometimes winding rotors, here you can truly see everything. Right down to the column wheel and the lateral clutch, you see pivot jewels set in golden chaton fixed by fire-blued screws, just as they would have been in 19th century and early 20th century German pocket watches. And you can see adjacent to the structure bearing the tourbillon, we have a freehand engraved bridge, a wonderfully spectacular timepiece that at 41.5 millimeters is surprisingly wearable. Not small by any means, but more wearable than you would expect for something this grandiose. And it includes a feature rarely seen on Longa watches, which is a full deployant clasp for additional security on the wrist. That said, I have an even more spectacular Longa on hand, and it is the Zeitwerk decimal repeater. Yes, decimal repeater, not a mere minute repeater. First, the Prestige. So the Zeitwerk debuted in 2009 as a full digital time display watch from Germany. Inspired by the 5-minute clock at the local opera house, the display shows you digital hours, minutes, and tens of minutes, and it is instantaneous jumping. It also includes a constant force mechanism that ensures this immensely sophisticated caliber L0435 doesn't experience fluctuations in balance amplitude as the strains of the jumping time display activate. So with this double third wheel and a hairspring in between them, we have a remontoir that tops off every minute, ensuring that the balance receives more or less constant force even as the discharge from the barrel fluctuates with the jump of the time. But wait, there's more. You can see there's a little governor built in, and this is a minute repeater, and it works by driving the minute repeater off the barrel. The idea here is that by pushing the button and minimizing the displacement of the switch that operates the minute repeater, you don't create the danger of a half-pulled slide, which is a perpetual threat to minute repeaters of conventional manufacture. So here, a simple touch of the button to activate the minute repeater operates the release for the barrel that then uses mainspring wind to drive the repeater, whereas on a conventional repeater, you charge up the strike barrel that drives the repeater by pulling the slide. Here, there is no such requirement. I'm not going to slide all the way through to 1259 here, but let's listen. 759 should give us a good run. Okay, so what happened there was that it jumped right before I activated it. What you want to do is you want to wait until the governor stops operating, and then it's as simple as just setting it backwards. Did you notice that instead of chiming the quarters, the repeater chimed 5 double tones? It is a decimal repeater, so it repeats the hours, the tens of minutes after the hour, and then the minutes after the last 10 minutes. That's why you got 7, 5 double tones, and then you got the 9 individual chimes. Normally, if you set a conventional minute repeater to 759, you will get 7 chimes. You will get 3 double tones for 3/4, then you'll get 14 chimes for the minutes after the quarter. This watch is immensely complex, staggeringly expensive and sophisticated, and yet the finish you get is as detailed and nuanced as any Longa. It's just rendered over a lot more components. In platinum, this watch measures 44.2 millimeters. I could wear it though, so if your wrist is my size, 16 centimeters circumference or larger, this is a great way to buy one of the canonical Longas. They always say get a Longa 1, a Dottograph, or a Zeitwerk, and among Zeitwerk models, the decimal repeater is the ultimate Zeitwerk. And because these things are just too much fun, let's do it one more time. The little red dot represents the point after which the power reserve can no longer jump the repeater. As good as it gets. Debaton has been my brand since forever. I happen to live a charmed life in which my company bought my favorite watch brand. And it's true, today, Debaton is a company that is owned by Watchbox, but still operating under the independent spirit and the aegis of Denis Flageolet, the same as it has since its founding in 2002. What we have here is the DB28 GS Yellow Submarine. So this is Debaton's take on a dive watch. It's 105 meters water resistant. It has a unidirectional rotating bezel, and yes, it does feature conventional lume. A lot of people think that it doesn't actually have lume. The watch absolutely has lume, and you can see it well here. This lume was created in conjunction with Black Badger and James Thompson, and you can see it is actually bicolored lume. The watch is remarkably thin, being only about 13 millimeters thick. On the dial side, there's a lot going on. The watch is made of titanium, not gold, and it's fired to achieve this lovely yellow hue. We have lugs that vary between 55 and 51 millimeters across. They are spring-loaded floating lugs, variable geometry. They adjust to your wrist. We have a deltoid-style barrel bridge that's been engraved with a micro-light guilloche. That's Debatoon's signature. They don't like to use conventional rose-lathe guilloche. They generally use this micro-light striation, and here you can see it on the base, on the deltoid barrel bridge, as well as on the case flank, and you can see that there. We have a screw-down crown, and then we have a full balance bridge with 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs that is called triple parachute shock protection. The watch has a manual wind twin barrel 5-day power reserve, and you can see the power reserve indicator hiding over at 9 o'clock on the dial. This is one of precious few center second DB28 models. And you can see there's a little minute repeater governor over at 3 o'clock, and let me show you why it has that minute repeater governor. The watch has dynamo-powered LED lighting that backlights the dive bezel and allows easy observation of the dial in the dark. 4 LEDs, the minute repeater governor slows down the discharge of energy from the barrels. It'll run for about 30 seconds, so you'll get a good look at the time. And of course, with LEDs, you don't need to previously charge up the watch. You can pull it out of a dive locker in the middle of the night, wind it up, and it'll be ready to loom when you need it. As you can see, much of the movement has been black polished and fired. It's constructed of titanium as well, so you get the same yellow tones on the movement that you get on the yellow submarine case. A lovely olive combination leather and textile strap, and a matching buckle you can see in double tone yellow fired titanium. One of the fun things about Debatoon fired titanium, whether blue or yellow, is that when the watch goes back to the factory, they can fire it again and reapply the color if it should be scratched while in your employ. So they can actually reapply the coating that gives the watch its color, and no other brand can do that, can reapply coating that gives metal a color. Debatoon is unique in that regard. And remember, they're only making about 200 to 220 watches a year with extraordinary levels of technical sophistication, proprietary technology and patents, and of course, aesthetic refinements such as the black polish, mirrored anglage, cut striations, and satination that you see on this dial. And we finish up with what might be the most spectacular watch I've encountered this year. This is the 20-piece limited edition white gold Debatoon DB25 Deadbeat Second Tourbillon. From a series launched in 2011, this 20-piece limited edition features a 4 to 5 day power reserve, a deadbeat second system. It is a rare Debatoon with hacking seconds, and it has a spectacular tourbillon regulator. It is a 30-second tourbillon, so it makes 2 circuits per minute, and it beats away at an El Primero like 36,000 vibrations per hour. Debatoon tourbillon watches are designed first and foremost for chronometry, not beauty. That is why this system is designed to run plus 1 second per day or less. You can see at center the mechanism that underpins the deadbeat second. You have 2 solid gold hand-finished wheels that are bound in the center by a hairspring. That stores up the energy to jump the seconds hand, and then we have these 2 pallet stones and a secondary locking lever that releases the system every second in order to jump the display on the dial side. Now, the tourbillon of this 20-piece limited edition is only 0.18 grams mass, which means it weighs less than 1/5 of a gram. It's made of white gold for the balance rim. That's where most of the mass is. The remainder is constructed of titanium and silicon. As you can see, the escape wheel is silicon. You can see that the structure of the carriage itself is titanium. And you can see that the wheel, the balance wheel with its spokes, that is actually blue silicon. All of this, again, geared toward chronometry. You have a flat hairspring that actually consists of 2 pieces shaped by hand and clamped together, so it breathes concentrically like an overcoil, and yet it's flat and shock resistant like a flat hairspring. Again, those escape wheels for the deadbeat second system are hand finished in 14 karat solid gold. We have Cote Debatoon stripes across the bridges, satination on the wheels and the barrels and the ratchet wheels. We have fired blue bridges for the deadbeat second system as well as the tourbillon, and we have a mirrored anglage on the edge of the bridges with black polished screw heads that have chamfered circumference and chamfered slots, all of which is to say this watch has brains and beauty. And on the dial side, you can see that the company, which makes case, dial, and movement in-house, has created a fired blue central disc. So this is black polished grade 5 titanium. Debaton then fires the titanium to create this blue color and drills little holes in the dial, inserting white gold pegs to create the image of the cosmos with the celestial bodies, all represented by little stalks of white gold. This is quite literally as good as it gets. It's thin in profile at under 12 millimeters thick, 4 to 5 day power reserve, deadbeat second, stop second, high-speed tourbillon, superb chronometry, aesthetically beautiful, traditionally finished. It leaves nothing to be desired. And again, I can't overemphasize, this was a 20-piece limited edition from a decade ago. They do not pop up that often. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of everything you see here.